When everything comes together, Otherworld Legends can be amazingly fun. Unfortunately, there's a couple notable flaws in gameplay design, mixed with mobile game monetization, which really hold it back. So let's get into it. Otherworld Legends is a fast-paced beat-em-up roguelite that reminds me of some classic arcade games. Your goal in this game is to clear 3 areas, each of which have their own mini-boss. You enter one room at a time, clear it of enemies, then move on to the next one until you die or the run is finished. The gameplay is one of those fast-paced attack spam style combat where you'll be swarmed with enemies that you have to clear. It's not overly complicated, but it can be pure, simple, uncomplicated fun. You play as one of 10 different heroes, and each hero has a basic attack, a dodge ability, and a customizable active or passive skills. Each character has 3 to 4 of these different skills that you can equip, and each skill has a couple different modifiers or variants. For example, one skill for Quan Huang, one of the starter heroes, gives you a powerful blast attack. And one modifier for that makes the attack deal more damage to a single enemy, while a different modifier for that blast attack makes the attack spread out further, dealing damage to a larger number of enemies. You usually only have one skill unlocked at the start, but I'll talk about the heavy progression unlocking system later on. The game is a good hero and class variety. Each character feels distinct, they cover a wide range of different playstyles, and they have unique abilities and self-synergies. That being said, I mostly only played with 2 or 3 different heroes because I found some of the classes to feel much stronger than the rest of them. I think some of these classes would really shine in co-op, which I didn't really play, because there's that aggro sharing, or in other words, enemies target both you and your teammate as opposed to just targeting you. But these classes felt super weak in solo, so I didn't really play with them. I also sometimes had aiming issues with the ranged characters because you have to more or less be on the same vertical plane as enemies when you hit them, which is easier said than done for some of the fast-moving enemies. And because of that, those ranged characters just felt a lot less reliable and therefore a lot weaker than the other melee-focused characters. Additionally, because each character only starts with a small amount of their abilities unlocked, you have to play with each character for a little bit before you really get a feel for all their possible synergies and skills. In addition to these different heroes and hero skills, you can also find items and weapons within each run that give you increased stat buffs, summons, or followers who attack enemies, or more specific item effects, such as being able to heal whenever you damage an enemy. You can equip up to 4 of these items at a time. You can also equip one weapon, and that weapon gives you both increased stats and gives you access to more items that are built into the weapon itself. I think the build crafting in this game as a whole is decent. You can create some fun combos, such as when I created a fun critical strike build that had increased crit chance, increased crit damage, and an item that healed me whenever I dealt critical damage. Additionally, the game allows you to have extra items outside of the 4 you have equipped. You store them in your backpack. And the game also allows you to change your skills or their modifiers between each fight. This means that you can keep extra items for later if you find better strategies, or you can also change your abilities before you fight certain enemies. Using that example earlier of the blast attack, I used the modifier with the increased single target damage for boss attacks, and then I switched back to the blast attack that had a larger area for clearing out normal rooms that are swarming with enemies. You can also combine basic items together to create more powerful hybrid items when you get to certain points along your run. So there are some nice synergies there and some build crafting mechanics in the game. And I like that flexible system where you could modify your skills and items constantly throughout the run if you wanted to. But at the same time, I don't think the build crafting in this game runs super deep in terms of strategy. I haven't had that feeling of finding a super OP build or combo. I never felt that I had to deliberately build craft or plan. It just didn't feel that important. In addition to that fun attack spam style of gameplay, I think the game really shines with the enemy variety and boss design. None of the enemies or bosses are overly complicated, but as a whole, I really enjoyed every boss encounter, both learning the mechanics as well as the art design and animations. I also was incredibly surprised with how many different enemy types existed in this game. There are 9 main areas in the game, and they each had incredibly diverse types of enemies, and no 2 areas shared enemies. This made each area feel truly distinct, and also gave some nice variety to each room within each area, even if the combat itself is fairly simple. The game also has a nice variety of random events, hidden rooms, and small touches here and there that really improve the game and make it feel fun to play. Also, as I hinted at earlier, the game has online co-op if you're looking for that feature. With just the qualities I described so far, I would classify Otherworld Legends as a good, fun game that lacks a little depth, but is great for killing time and for simple fun. But that gameplay has a couple incredibly notable flaws. First, it's fairly easy to get stun locked and insta-killed. There are some one-shot protection mechanics, you have some invulnerability frames the first time you lose your shield or armor for example, but it's still very easy to get comboed to death as you get staggered repeatedly by enemy attacks. This can be frustrating, especially at higher difficulties where so many enemies spawn at once. Their damage output really punishes small mistakes. But there's also some room for player skill here. As you get better at the game, you can avoid this more often and not get one shot so frequently. Second, and this is really my number one biggest criticism with this game as a whole, and that is there are forced pauses between fights. In this game, you have two health bars. One is normal health and one that is armor. Like a lot of other games, health is more permanent and requires picking up items to restore it, while armor will constantly regenerate slowly on its own. This is fine during combat, but it keeps the slow pace of regeneration even out of combat. This means that if you clear a room, but you lost your armor, you have two bad options ahead of you. You can enter the next room with no armor, which greatly increases your chances of dying and losing your run, or you can wait the painfully long time it takes for your armor to restore before moving on. I actually timed it out a couple of times, and with certain builds, it took 60 to 80 seconds for my armor to fully regenerate so I could move on to the next room. So if you wanted to play the game optimally, you could have to wait 80 seconds after clearing each room before going on to the next one. And this might genuinely be the single most frustrating and anti-fun gameplay mechanic that I've dealt with in years. To be clear, I didn't encounter this after every single room, but it happened often enough that it just felt really bad. I hope the developers fix this by increasing the out-of-combat armor regeneration speed. This game is a port of a mobile game that has over 100,000 reviews, so I genuinely don't understand how nobody has complained about this and how this hasn't been fixed with so much time that it's been out after so many people have played it. Maybe this is something that only really bothered me, but man, it really bothered me. And this is the main reason that I haven't played this game as much as I would have otherwise. There were a couple items and builds that improved this waiting time in different ways, but I didn't get those items, didn't get that build every single run, and I really don't think I should have to rely on one or two very specific items in order to make the game feel playable. Outside of that, there are a couple UI related things that were buggy around launch state, but these bugs seem to have all been fixed. Also, if you're using controller, which I strongly recommend, you have to navigate the UI by using your controller like a mouse. They did add some features to make that navigation easier, like magnetic buttons that draw your mouse into them, but it's clear that this game wasn't originally designed around having a controller navigate these menus from various things like clicking on buttons, selecting characters. It's just all a little awkward. It's very functional right now, it gets the job done, and they have made a lot of improvements, but those limitations definitely show. And while this is a mobile game port, there is no cross progression with the mobile game. So if you have this game on mobile, you have to restart if you grab it on Steam. And on that note, let's move into the monetization of this game. I'll talk a bit about the progression structure at the same time as well, because the monetization and the progression are very closely intertwined. I have two parallel opinions on the monetization in this game. The idealist in me absolutely hates certain ways that this game is monetized, which are directly borrowed from the mobile game version. But at the same time, the realist in me thinks that it's incredibly possible to play this game and enjoy it without engaging in any of those monetization tactics, and what you pay for the base game, the core game, is incredibly fair. This monetization is broken up into a couple different categories for me. You have the base game and the character unlocks, the cosmetics and skins, you have the progression and pay-to-win style boosters. In terms of the base game, you're paying $8 to unlock the game with 4 starting characters. Outside of that, you unlock the rest of the characters with $2 or $3 purchases. The mobile version of this game is free, so with the base version, you're basically paying to start with a couple characters unlocked. There are also a lot of skins for each character at $2 or $3 each, and these skins make up a bulk of the DLC that you see on Steam. You're not meant to pay that full price tag, it's meant for you to pick and choose a couple skins if you want to. I think this part of the monetization is perfectly fine. Nothing here is overpriced, and you can unlock every character in the game by just playing the game. However, the unlocking system for each character is not straightforward. You have to do daily tasks or achievements to unlock hero fragments, and then once you have enough hero fragments, you have to buy your character from the store. But not every character is available all the time. They're on a rotation, you have to wait for that character to be available before you can buy it. It's definitely doable, but it's also deliberately a hassle to unlock these characters. And that starts to get us into these mobile game monetization elements and how they tie into the progression system. Otherworld Legends is a progression-heavy roguelite that uses several different currencies and different progression systems. Some of these systems are just needlessly complex or overcomplicated. And in certain places, it can feel like monetization and microtransactions are the main driving force behind their design. So, as a starting example, there are 3 main currencies in the game: soul gems, rubies, and sapphires, with soul gems being the primary currency of those 3. Each of these buys slightly different upgrades. So soul gems, for example, can buy Asura power levels, which are basically small stat increases like increased health or crit chance, while sapphires can be used to unlock new skills or skill traits for each character. As I mentioned earlier, each character start with only one skill unlocked, only one trait for that skill, so if you want to actually explore several different builds and playstyles, you have to spend sapphires to do so. This game really doesn't need 3 main types of currencies though, and there are ways to convert between all 3 of them. Additionally, you basically get all 3 of these currencies from the same sources, which is mainly completing runs, doing the daily tasks or achievements, and the Mirage Pass, which is a battle pass equivalent. It just feels unnecessarily confusing without adding any real depth to the game. And here's the first pay-to-win type mechanic that I'll talk about, which is that you can directly buy soul gems from the store. And because soul gems can become rubies and sapphires, you also indirectly buy sapphires and rubies. What that means is you can avoid all these progression gated unlocks and power-ups if you choose to spend real world money. I don't really love this, but you can ignore it. The progression feels a little slow without paying money, but it's not unbearable. Again, you don't have to spend money here if you don't want to. Unfortunately, this monetization is even more in your face in a couple other places. When you die on each run, you're given the option of respawning once per run, but that costs resurrection cards, something else you can buy with real money. This just feels icky to see in a single-player roguelite on Steam, and I deliberately avoid these types of gameplay elements, and that's one of the reasons I don't play mobile games. The developers have responded to concerns like this, and you can now buy respawns with a small amount of soul gems, which I think is perfectly fair, but I still don't like that you can buy that type of buff, a continue option, with real-world money. I think it does show the developers are willing to consider how this game is monetized on Steam, maybe make some changes, but that might also be just wishful thinking on my part. But there are also more small mechanics here and there that are classic cases of gameplay problems deliberately designed in order to sell you the solution for real money. As I mentioned earlier, you can have 4 items equipped at one time. You can also equip one weapon, and that weapon has several items attached to it. Normally, you're kind of stuck with those items that are attached to the weapon, but there are some times where you can replace those items with new items. But unfortunately, whenever you try to replace an item on your weapon with a new item, that replacement is not guaranteed to work. If that replacement fails, you lose an item. So it's a gamble basically. But surprise, surprise, you can buy an item with real money that guarantees that replacement will succeed. There is no reason for this gamble to exist. It's designed that way so that you spend money to solve that problem that, again, does not need to exist. And I just hate seeing that. And I audibly groaned when I first ran into this in game. And there are also some other game systems and mechanics like the pets that I just completely ignored because it looked heavily monetized. You can also buy drinks before each run, which by itself would be kind of a cool system. Basically, these drinks give you a small stat increase, small buff, like increased damage to bosses or increased health, and you can find ingredients for these drinks along each run as a secondary loot pool. But yet again, monetization comes in. You can buy a pass that makes drinks cheaper, or you can buy extra soul gems that bypass that ingredient system. Basically, you can pay to win here by getting a stat increase before each run if you use real world money. So looking at all this together, all the monetization in this game, you don't have to engage with these microtransactions. You really don't. But they do come up again and again, so you'll never forget that they're there, and it just cheapens the whole experience and leaves an unsavory taste in my mouth. It's also just too many different parallel progression systems. Even outside of the monetized ones I talked about earlier, there are character levels for each character, there is an account-wide level that unlocks new items for your item pool that allows for new builds, and there are achievement unlocks that give you rewards in the form of soul gems. I think these non-monetized progression systems are mostly fine, but they just felt completely overshadowed by everything else that was monetized. So what's my verdict on Otherworld Legends? I think what frustrates me the most about this game is it feels like the developers got all of the hard aspects right. They did a lot of things well, and they just messed up everything that was easy. The core gameplay is solid with cool character designs, good enemy variety, great art design, and fun bosses. And that's all really hard to do well. It's not super deep or complex, but the core gameplay loop is fun. Unfortunately, that forced waiting between rooms that I had to deal with, mixed with that mobile game pay-to-win monetization, really hold this game back. Honestly, if they fix that armor regeneration speed out of combat, I would say this game is worth buying if you don't mind or if you can ignore that microtransaction, monetization, etc. And if they fix that, I'll probably come back into this game and sink some more time into it because it does so many things well. But as it is right now, with those massive gameplay flaws and that unsavory monetization, I just can't recommend this game to most people. Huge shout out and thank you to all of our channel members for helping support the channel. Please like this video to help me out in the algorithm, and thanks for watching.